This human is the first mob ever added to Minecraft, and it's just one of over 100 mobs added to the game since 2009. And we'll also see every mob that Mojang removed, like the redstone bug from 2013 or this angry ghast nether boss. Starting first with, why are they called mobs anyway? On May 13th of 2009, the first ever mob was added to Minecraft, and it was just called a mob because that's short for mobile. And while classic mob does refer to the original Steve model, there were a whole bunch that didn't fit into any generation of the game, those being Reyna, Steve, Black Steve, and Beast Boy. And it wasn't until the community named the second one of the bunch Steve that we finally got the name for the player character. And our first recognizable Minecraft mob wouldn't come until September 1st of the same year. Many of you probably already know that creepers were made because Notch messed up the pig model, but you might not know that when creepers were first added, they used to be a lot darker in texture than we're used to. And also, when they were first introduced, the creepers were just a melee attacking mob, a lot more like the zombies that we'd later get. And while they would still explode, it only happened after they died. But that explosion was much larger than we're used to, exploding in a 4x4x4 sphere upon death. And as a point of fact, the creeper explosions could actually drop the water and lava items that they blew up, meaning not even liquids could stop this thing. And in that same update, we got the proper implementation of pigs as well. When the pig mod was first added, it actually didn't have a snout, which is pretty ridiculous to see, but what's also ridiculous is the fact that we were able to ride the pigs as early as InfDev in 2010, but we didn't have the ability to steer them until after 1.4.2 in 2012. Who knew just a carrot on a stick would be that important? Well, it makes sense since they weren't very interested in carrots back then, considering they'd only drop brown mushrooms on death originally. And it wouldn't be until 2010 that pork chops were actually added as an item. Also during Minecraft Classic, we saw the implementation of the skeleton, but what we saw back then was definitely different from what we see today. Originally, they didn't carry bows, but don't think that means you were safe from any arrows. Consider that also in the survival test, they would shoot off these special skeleton arrows, shooting 6 different arrows in a short range in different directions. And while they were eventually given their bows in Java Edition Alpha, they didn't know how to hold them the right way. And we wouldn't see the modern interpretation until Java Edition Beta 1.8. And while skeletons have been able to spawn at a lot of different light levels throughout the years, not needing an absolute light level of 0 to spawn in the overworld, they also used to burn due to the light level from torches. Back before it was set to only sunlight was able to burn them, torches gave off a bright enough light level that they could actually burn skeletons to death. The fourth mod added in September 1st to 2009 was the zombies, which while they've been able to wear armor dating back for years, even as early as this plate armor that was removed from Minecraft, it's hard to notice that they actually do have natural armor points even if they're not wearing armor, which that would be why your zombie spawners might occasionally cause you trouble for one-hit kill traps. And speaking of kill traps, these zombies used to be a lot more deadly, considering that originally they were able to run as fast as the player, and thankfully that one's been changed since. On October 24th of 2009, we got the spiders added in Minecraft, and then later on during beta, spiders actually had a unique ability where they were able to see the player through blocks. But while this was added during the beta phase, it was removed in 1.8. And while nowadays Minecraft makes the sound effects for different mobs by going and recording them live on location, the spider sounds were actually created by distorting garden hose sounds, which was mentioned in the Sound of Minecraft episode recorded by 20,000 Hertz. And speaking of Minecraft documentaries, this tidbit about spiders came from the story of Mojang, which was a proof of concept for a feature-length film. In the short 11-minute clip, Jeb mentions that the way that spiders are able to climb every single block is that they just always think that they're on a ladder, which I think is the kind of dumb solution that's perfectly brilliant in its execution. And just 3 days after our spider, we got another source of wool, those being the sheep. Though before wool was actually added as a block, the sheep would drop cloth, which was just the original name for the wool block, as well as mushrooms. I guess they take that from the pig. And stranger still is that cloth actually used to be able to craft into cloth armor, but that was eventually replaced with the leather armor that we would get from our cows. And the cloth itself was also changed to wool in beta 1.0. The first mob added in 2010 was the now unseen giant, which throughout its history has never really done much, but during InfDev, the giant texture was changed to the player model as opposed to the zombie, before eventually being changed back. But there might have been plans to bring this mob back, since during the development of 1.14, they were given proper AI, baby variants, and even their own chicken jockey. But you would have never noticed it since it was reversed before the full release of 1.14. On March 16th of that same year, we finally got our first monster added to Minecraft, which I know seems odd considering that we've already talked about plenty monsters on this list already, but rather this was meant to be a catch-all category for a new kind of monster mob. But to say they were well implemented is a stretch, considering that originally they would just imitate zombies and being hostile toward the player, and when they were very first added, the monster was accidentally invisible, proving that the evil you don't know is much worse than the evil you do. After Minecraft Classic, InDev, and InfDev, we finally got the cows added in Minecraft Alpha, specifically version 1.0.8. And with those old versions of the cows, they also went through a lot of different texture changes as well, originally being darker in color and then having their horns moved to the inside, outside, front, and back of their head. And one thing you can particularly notice on the cows is that they have both both an udder and the horns, which goes back to Minecraft's philosophy in its design book that all of the mobs be made gender neutral, which seems fitting with the fact that in older versions of Minecraft, the cows could originally breed with the mushrooms, though this would be removed in release 1.2.1, now requiring you to shear the mushroom before you're able to have any offspring. And textures weren't the only subtle change to our cows, since in 1.9, the cows were made slightly taller from 1.3 blocks to 1.4. And speaking to someone who's not quite 6 foot, I can appreciate trying to get any bit of height increase that you can. Things moved a lot faster back in Minecraft Alpha, considering that just 4 days after the addition of the cow, slimes were added to the game as well. And when they were first added, they didn't have the same kind of semi-translucency that we're used to, and their eyes were also a deep black color. But we get the slime textures that we're used to just 5 days after. And while slimes have always been able to spawn at different sizes, the ones from trial spawners are particularly interesting. Since while natural spawns are created for size 0, 1, and 3 in the NBT, trial-made slimes are able to spawn at size 1 and 2. And the semi-large size is only able to be encountered at a trial chamber in vanilla, otherwise you'd have to use commands. While the alpha version of the chicken might look similar to all the chickens that we see today, it had one fatal flaw. That being that when they were first added, they were actually still able to take fall damage. And this wouldn't be changed until later in alpha. But even still, that might not be the strangest change the chickens have had, considering that for a roughly 2-year period between 1.4.2 and 1.8, you were actually able to breed chickens using nether wart. I mean, I guess they could spawn in the nether with zombified piglin jockeys, but I thought the only person who likes to eat nether wart was Blue from Animator vs. Animation. With alpha version 1.2, the gas was the very first nether mob added to Minecraft, which also makes it the first nether mob to be exploited, considering that in beta, going into F5 mode would actually make the fireball aim at the camera instead of the player's head. So if you just press the F5 key, you'd be completely safe from any kind of gassed fireball. And originally when the gas was first added, the idea was that they could spawn at the nether portal that would generate in the overworld, similar to how the zombified piglins actually do in the game, which would have made the gold farms a lot less efficient. And while a common complaint for most of the gas's life was that the textures didn't match the pixel consistency of the model, this was eventually changed with the release of the Happy Ghasts, with the original ghast getting an updated texture as well. When zombified piglins were first added to the game, they were originally called zombie pigmen, and even dating back to this tweet by Notch, Mojang always kind of thought they were useless. And the very first version of the zombie pigmen that we saw were actually unarmed, though this was never in anything that was playable to the public, considering that only existed in a preview given to gaming outlets. But what we would see is that in alpha, the zombie pigmen could actually drop cooked pork chops, making for a much better food source in the nether compared to rotten flesh. But ultimately that was removed in version 1.0, giving us the rotten flesh and gold nuggets that we're familiar with today. Oh, and also, you'd never noticed this, but in the code they were actually referred to as pig zombies. The first aquatic mob ever added to Minecraft is also up there for one of its most useless. But with squids lack in function, they more than make up for in knockback resistance. Ravagers in Java have 70% knockback resistance, but squids have up to 80, so you can't even get rid of them if you're trying hard enough. In beta 1.4, the wolves were added to Minecraft, and the original texture for them was very different from what we see today, originally having a dark face and legs. And when they were first added to multiplayer, considering that most features came to single player first back then, they used to always make whimpering sounds, even if they were at full health, making it for one of the earliest noise machine pranks. And one thing that's interesting about wolves is that taming a wolf increases its health by 5-fold, taking it from 4 hearts or 8 HP up to 20 hearts, which is double our life total, and it's actually the same as an Enderman. This entity was only added to advertise the Pocket Edition on the Xperia Play device, which don't worry, I had to look up too. It was this thing, a Sony spin-off phone that you would slide up and play different games on. And that was where we would find this mob, the Builder, which had the ability to both place and break blocks before exploding a few minutes after you would spawn it. And they were only found in a special version of the game never meant to release to the public, beta 1.202 2011-05-17. And a much more annoying mob that was actually added to the game was the Cave Spider in beta 1.8 pre-release. So while their poison and small size makes them annoying to deal with, it is worth noting that cave spiders actually are incapable of trampling crops. I don't know why you'd ever notice this, they're never on the surface to check, but if you want to start a weed farm down there in the mines, you don't have to worry about that part of it. And in that same update, we had 2 other mobs added to the game, with the first being Enderman, which when they were first shown off at a demo at the PAX convention, Enderman actually dropped diamonds as a placeholder for the ender pearls that they'd later get. And this first version of them used to shoot off smoke particles and had green eyes, which already makes them unrecognizable, but the strangest part about this is that when they were first added, they actually could die to arrows, which was then changed in the full 1.0 release. Then the other mob in the first adventure update was the Silverfish, which back when we had to deal with them then, they had as much health as the player before there was changed in the full 1.0. And while the texture for the mob existed in the code as early as beta 1.7, they weren't added into the game until beta 1.8 pre-release. And in 1.21, we got the infested potion effect, which made Silverfish spawn anytime they take damage. However, thankfully, Silverfish are the only mob actually immune to this, which prevents any kind of Silverfish spawning loops. On September 22nd of 2011, blazes were added to the game, and they used to attack creative players who would hit them. Cave spiders notably did the same, and it wouldn't be until a few updates later where this behavior was actually changed, considering what's the point? But that's not the only exploit in the Blaze's AI. Considering that exploiting their pathing AI, we're actually able to get them to move to where we want without needing any kind of redstone or flowing lava. And since Blazes will never actually try to walk onto glass, you can strategically place solid blocks to get them to follow where to go. And another nether mob added the same day were the lava slimes, or at least that's what Jab initially wanted to call them. But when they felt like it was too lazy, we got the magma cubes that we're all familiar with. And considering magma cubes could survive when swimming, they wouldn't get any kind of actual threat until the frogs were added in 1.19. Though it is worth noting that magma cubes have an absolute 0% chance of dropping magma creams when killed by frogs. And then in 1.20, they were able to be impacted finally by the jump boost effect, making way for our very first magma cube space program. Moving out of the nether, beta 1.9 also brought us the mushrooms, which while in Minecraft are distinctly passive, in dungeons they're oddly enough hostile mobs, actually having tankier stats than another hostile mob like a zombie. And while you might be familiar with the rare chance of breeding 2 red mushrooms together to get a brown mushroom, it is worth noting that breeding together 2 brown mushrooms also has a 0.09765625% chance to give a red mushroom. When the snow golems were first shown off, they were originally named the snowmen, but then Reddit user Cuddleman suggested to name them snow golems, and the rest is history. But that isn't the last of the weird history that we see for the snow golems, considering that back in beta we were actually able to breed them together using wheat. But whenever you held wheat, they would also attack at the player, made for the only time they ever do so. But they've also always been big softies, considering that originally they used to flee when attacked, which might be helpful for them nowadays, considering that goats are more hostile towards snow golems than they are to zombies, which I really don't get. It's not even like they have bad associations with powder snow. The 25th mob added in Minecraft was the villager, but you wouldn't know that when they were first added in, considering the very first version of the villager originally had the same AI as the pig, and they were named testificates, which you would see in giant bold letters over their head. And when the villager spawn egg was first added in, it was only possible to get farmer villager types breeding from it. But the darkest secret to our villagers is that they do actually have a way to damage you. See, when they're celebrating a raid victory, villagers will occasionally launch off fireworks that can deal damage depending on the difficulty. And so if that firework were to hit anything, it'll treat it as an attack, and the fighting mobs will always retaliate, including even iron golems, killing the very villagers they sought to defend. On October 13th of 2011, Mojang finally answered a big question on everyone's mind. What was Rakrakentba? Since that was the name that was first shown off in this ROT13 cipher tweet, which translated to Ender Dragon. And then the mob was first shown off on Notch's YouTube channel in this video, appearing just at the top of the frame. And if you want to see something strange, switch over to peaceful difficulty when you're encountering the Ender Dragon, which is completely harmless. Neither its melee attacks nor the Dragon Breath are actually able to do any damage, which even while harmless wasn't the easiest version of the Ender Dragon to kill. Consider that in beta 1.9 pre-release 5, it was only given 1 HP so that they could test the death animation. Oh, and the boss bar that spawns above it, that originally said boss health before it said Ender Dragon in 1.4.2. The first mob ever added in a proper snapshot was in 12W04A, where we got ocelots, which back then were a lot more important. They were the way we tamed them to get cats, and they were also one of the few mobs that can sprint. Sure enough, that fast speed that you see them running at is not actually their normal speed attribute, and rather their regular speed is only slightly faster than creepers or skeletons, and about the same as an enderman. They also used to eat pufferfish, which I could definitely get that one being changed. And prior to 1.8.2, if you wanted to find one of these things, you'd have to check your Y level, considering they'd only spawn at exactly Y level 63, that being sea level. It's strange to think about, but iron golems are newer than ocelots, being added in snapshot 12W08A. And that very first snapshot where they were added in, they were so exploitable that you were able to make a simple farm to get 76,000 ingots per hour, which to put in perspective, a common farm nowadays is going to give you about 1,300 per hour. And while they were a lot easier to kill back then, they didn't actually have cracks in their texture until 1.15. But when those cracks were first added, they used to show even when the mob was invisible. And before 1.20.2, there existed a bug that let iron golems attack through walls. But that was eventually fixed with the attack range rework that affected most of the mobs. And on August 9th of 2012, our iron golems would be defending us from the zombie villagers, which when they first came to the game used to wear Steve clothes the same way that our zombies do, which makes the lore a lot more confusing. And while there exists an Easter egg for our undead mobs to make them spawn with pumpkins or jack-o'-lanterns on their head at Halloween, the baby zombie villagers had a weird glitch which would spawn the pumpkin or jack-o'-lantern hovering above their head. But that's not as odd as this short-lived feature, because between 1.5 and 1.6.1, zombie villagers used to deal more damage the lower their health got. And before 1.11, zombie villagers used to spawn from zombie spawners as a variant, which meant that if you found a zombie spawner, you also found a villager spawner once you cured them. In the snapshots for the pretty scary update, the wither was finally added in Minecraft. The first place they were found was in the snapshot textures, considering that before they were properly implemented, their skin was left in the mobs folder. And before 1.4.1, 1.4, they used to be craftable in peaceful mode, though doing this wouldn't actually spawn it, it just wasted the soul sand and skulls. Which, speaking of skulls, in snapshot 12W36A, we finally got the wither skeletons needed to spawn the wither. And in 1.9, we got an even rarer variant of the wither skeleton, which if you can't notice it, I don't really blame you. But if you pay close attention, you'll notice that a rare 11% chance of these wither skeletons spawn left-handed, much the same way that real-world left-handedness is. Also, while plenty of people see the piglins and hoglins fighting, wither skeletons also attack piglins on sight, and vice versa. Meaning if you stumble across a fortress in piglin grounds, you could watch a turf war take place. Fitting the pretty scary updates vibe, in snapshot 12W38A, bats were added to the game, but they were added as ambient mobs, meaning that they don't serve a purpose other than the atmosphere. But while they are labeled as ambient mobs, they do actually trigger certain things. Granted, they can't activate pressure plates or tripwire hooks, but they can still trigger skulk by making sounds. And along with our bats, we also got the witch added to the game, which when they were first added, they weren't very good with their own potions, considering that original witches used to be able to hurt themselves with their damaging potions. As well, the first version of the witch originally had the same skin color as the villagers, making it a lot more obvious where they came from. And while you might have seen witches drinking fire resistance or health potions to keep themselves alive, they will also drink potions of water breathing to save themselves from drowning. You're just probably not flooding a witch hut very often. The first joke mob ever added to Minecraft was the Diamond Chicken. In the April Fool's prank for 2013, Minecraft released Minecraft 2.0. And with the special update, we got a whole bunch of new mobs, like the Diamond Chickens, which had the ability to lay lapis and diamonds, but they also had a 5% chance to explode. Next in Mojang's prank was the horse and pony mobs, which were a commonly asked for feature, but here they were just retextured pigs and cows. You couldn't even saddle the horse, just the ponies. But they did have the unique feature following you around if you held out an apple or sugar, and if you keep that sugar on hand, it might help with this next mob, since the first version of the pink wither also came in this update. And I say the first version because there was another version of the pink wither that came in snapshot 15W14A for the Love and Hugs prank 2 years later. Now the first version came with the ability to follow around the player if it held out sugar, but it couldn't fly. And the more sugar you fed it, the more heads it would grow, helping it grow plants around in a 15 block radius. And then the one we got 2 years later in the Love and Hugs update was a lot more common to the regular wither, but pink. This one shot out the classic skulls, but it would heal the entities instead. And if you caused a redstone error while playing in Minecraft 2.0, that would cause the redstone bug to spawn, which was a red version of a regular silverfish. But interestingly, they were actually dyed different colors based on the NBT tag when you spawn them, which is why they could be a different range of red colors, matching our redstone, as opposed to just singular red. A few weeks after April Fools, horses were added to Minecraft properly. And in the snapshots where they were first added for the 1.6 update, they used to require a separate horse saddle item to ride, until it was eventually standardized to be the same saddle as our pigs. And these horses that we first saw were originally based on the Mo Creatures horse models, before eventually getting a more Minecrafty look a few years later. And while horses nowadays aren't one of the most popular forms of travel, it is worth noting that if you ride a horse, you can use it to instantly enter nether portals instead of waiting for the warping animation, which if you combine that with a fast horse, it makes nether portal transportation even faster. Along with our horses, donkeys also entered the game in this update. And when they were first added in, donkeys weren't nearly as slow as we expect them to be, but that was changed in just the following snapshot. So if you're looking to gain some of that efficiency back, it is worth noting that we can use a dispenser to place chests and saddles onto our donkeys, or maybe you'd just rather breed them into mules. If you're wondering why it takes your mule so long to regenerate, there's a reason for it, although it's a bit odd. See, mules regenerate randomly, not at a fixed rate, which means that every tick that passes, 20 ticks to a second, there's a 1 in 900 chance that they'll restore 1 HP. So if they're not regenerating, you're just getting unlucky. And did you know there used to be a bug where our saddles would disappear on mules when they were invisible, meaning we could have a fully out-of-sight steed to ride into battle, which is a lot cooler than the other horses that we weren't allowed to see, the skeleton horses. When skeleton horses were first added in, they weren't accessible through normal gameplay, and it wouldn't be until years later with the skeleton horse traps where we finally got a proper implementation. And one of the strangest things about the skeleton horses, other than its history, is that they're one of the only undead mobs that's completely immune to sunlight, which contrasts this to zombie horses, which thankfully have now been added in the Mounts of Mayhem update. But when they were first added in, they didn't actually burn in the sunlight, though now, with the recent update, they do. And one of the reasons for this is that in the latest snapshots, zombie horses always despawn like any normal monster. But as soon as you interact with them in any way, they'll become persistent and just behave like a regular horse, letting you tame them and not have to worry about it disappearing. The first mob of 2014 was the Endermite, which is mentioned by this article on Minecraft.net. Endermites are stated to exist within an in-between dimension, and because they're a parasite that they pick up along the way, that's why Endermen hate them. Later in 2014, Guardians came to the game, and the first place to spot a Guardian was actually on the Minecraft subreddit, since Jeb added its face as a subreddit flare. And this Reddit post shows off different speculation about what the teaser exactly could mean, with one user even expecting it to be the same size as the Ghast, considering the Ghast's head is also 16x16 texture, while the other mobs were only 8x8. And thankfully we didn't have to deal with Guardians that big, But our guardians can still be pretty scary, considering their laser beam attacks are affected by the potion of strength, which otherwise only affects melee attacks for other mobs. And in that same 14W25A snapshot, we got Elder Guardians as well, which despite being added in Pocket Edition's boss update, Jeb still calls them mini bosses, not bosses. But whatever you call them, if you see one of these spawn outside of an ocean monument, then you'll notice that it always automatically paths towards the nearest one, which this is to prevent them from free roaming the ocean and applying mining fatigue to anyone out there, just in case you happen to let one loose. And yet an even deadlier mob would be added 2 snapshots after, the rabbit. Or more specifically, the evil rabbit, which his original texture looked like this. And while they didn't come into the game until 2014, they were originally mentioned by Notch for the survival test. But the idea back then was to kill them and explode them into blood and gore if attacked, which thankfully has never seen the light of day. And the reason why if you name a rabbit Toast with a name tag to get this special variant is because a Twitter user Zyzen420's girlfriend's missing rabbit, which when they reached out to the Mog Miner, inspired them to go and try to help out. With the Love and Hugs update for Minecraft in 2015, we got a brand new wave of April Fool's mobs, starting with the Love Golem, which functionally is just a retextured Iron Golem. But the main difference for this one is that they have no aggression towards hostile mobs. I mean, it's the Love and Hugs update, what do you expect? Which is also why we got this Smiling Creeper, with the big difference here being that the Smiling Creeper, instead of exploding blocks, would only drop poppies, which we couldn't even pick up, which is unique because there's never been an instance in mod or vanilla of an item that cannot be picked up. You know what they say, a rose by any other name? At least we could pick it up. This mob wasn't nearly as friendly as the Love and Hugs update, but on July 29th of 2015, the Shulker was added in Minecraft. And because it works as a living block, you might be surprised to know that if you were to put one of these inside of a minecart, you can actually still walk on top of it like a regular block, giving us basically a moving platform. And while some of you might know that the Shulker's bullet that it shoots out is called the Spark, stranger still is that the game's files originally called the Shulker the Ender Golem in its texture file, which kind of makes this the first fully hostile golem, and also the first dyeable. Considering that since 1.11, to match the different Shulker box colors, we can now dye our Shulkers in 16 different colors, if we use the commands. Though you can't actually just dye them on Bedrock. Ever since they were added, husks haven't been that far different from our regular zombies, with the most they did back in 2016 meaning that they just didn't burn in the sun, and they would give us the hunger effect. However, as of the Mounts of Mayhem update, husks now have the ability to drop a rabbit's foot, but only if they're riding a camel husk, which is because we can then use that rabbit's foot to help tame up that camel husk. But before you jump to the most recent update, you might want to check out to see if you have a husk holding a glowing sack first, since if you do, that's one of the rarest mobs that you can find. Ever since 1.17.1, they don't do this anymore. However, one difference that does still exist is that they are taller on Bedrock Edition than they are on Java. However, only slightly. On May 18th of 2016, polar bears were added in Minecraft after Jeb's wife asked for bears to be added to the game. And while it was to commemorate their new baby son, I doubt that had anything to do with this broken baby polar bear model that we got in snapshot 19W39A. And then again, the polar bear model broke in snapshot 24W33A, having all its limbs separated off of the body. Added in that same 16W28 snapshot, the Stray came to the game, which was based off an idea originally from the Washington development team during a game jam. And despite being a separate entity from skeletons, they're still capable of giving music discs if they kill creepers. In fact, they're so similar that strays actually used to spawn if you used a regular skeleton egg in a snowy biome back before this was changed. Oh, and in Pocket Edition, they didn't have their cloak when they were first added in. Now it just looks cold, or colder. The first mob vote mob ever added in Minecraft is the llama. Strange as it may seem, the only reason that llamas came to the game instead of alpacas is because of this tweet where Jeb did a poll on Twitter, which also means that tweet's the reason for the only mob that could hurt us in peaceful mode. Sure enough, up until 1.17, llamas were the only mob that could actually damage you in peaceful mode if you hit them. Even wolves didn't have this ability, but it's been fixed since Caves and Cliffs. It's strange to think that the first illagers added in Minecraft weren't the pillagers, but rather the vindicators. Entering in the same update as our llamas, the vindicators were added to help populate the new woodland mansions. But if you leave them unarmed with the commands, then they attack you with both their arms up like a zombie. And while they can't break down doors, it is worth noting that a Johnny Vindicator will attack armor stands but can never break them. And the reason for that is to break an armor stand, you have to hit it twice in quick succession. They just don't attack fast enough. The next time that you're fighting an evoker, pay close attention to the different particles that it shoots off, since when it summons Vexes or conjures up the fangs, it emits different color particles and sounds, which you could use this to help you predict and fight them during a raid. And as of 1.18, they're now a little less evil, considering that since that update, they no longer attack baby villagers, which is great, but their babies are still annoying to deal with. When Vexes are first spawned, they memorize and store that spawn point on the evoker, and then return back to that area within a 15 by 15 range, which is somewhat similar to how the Happy Guest remembers its home area. And if you want to see something funny, get a Johnny Vindicator next to a Vex, since if any mob attacks a Vex, any of the Vexes within the area become hostile toward it. In 2017, we got parrots added in Minecraft, and when they first came to the game, if you played any music next to them in a jukebox, they would cycle through all of their different variants, based off this classic rainbow dancing parrot emote. And while they haven't gotten a lot of love since, strangely enough, you can't actually tame parrots by using sniffer plant seeds. Yeah, both the torch flower seeds and the pitcher pods work for this, though those are such a pain to farm that you're probably just better off using regular wheat seeds. Along with the giant, the illusioner is the only secret mob still left not added to Minecraft, which is pretty brutal considering that when they were first added in snapshot 17W16A, you originally needed to kill the illusioner for the monster's hunted advancement, despite it never spawning naturally. And if you want a really unnatural illusioner, summon one without its default bow, since if you do, they become passive, which is basically the same thing that happens when our pillagers break their crossbow. The monster of the night skies, otherwise known as Mob B, was finally added to Minecraft in 18W07A, but to us it's better called the Phantom, which originally was supposed to be red in texture, but it looked too much like a nether mob so it was never used, except for as in Minecraft Dungeons, where here we got the Phantom Familiar Pet. And if you're ever sick of phantom spawns, it is worth noting that you don't just have to sleep to prevent them. Yeah, dying also will get rid of them. I didn't say it was a good idea. And one of the particularly fun details that we got when Minecraft Dungeons released is that the sound effects for the Phantom actually came from one of the developer's sons screaming. Makes sense, both prevent you from going to sleep. When turtles were first shown off, they had a much different design, which I gotta say is actually pretty cute. But it's not the only rare turtle to see, since if you pay extra close attention to the turtle's model whenever you breed it, when it gets ready to go lay its eggs, if you prevent it from doing so, you'll notice the turtle's model actually changes slightly when it's pregnant. Which if you notice that, good for you, but I also question your hobbies. And originally we used to be able to breed these mobs using raw cod, before that changed over to seagrass in 18W07B. And let's talk about cod, which got its own properly added mob on February 22nd of 2018. And when it first showed up in Bedrock Edition, the cod spawn egg was originally based off of fish eggs, before eventually being changed to just the regular spawn eggs that we see today. And if you want to keep a naturally spawned cod, then pick one up in a water bucket and then place it back down. Now it's basically a cod pet. It's not going to disappear, just don't get hungry. We got plenty more fish in this snapshot, like the salmon, but unlike the cod, salmon can actually spawn at different size variants. Originally, we only saw this in Bedrock, but now it's been added to Java for parity reasons. And you'll find 31% of them are going to be small, 52% are normal size, and 15% are large. The pufferfish mob was also added with the same kind of spawn eggs in Bedrock Edition. And originally, they were labeled as puffer fish, with a space in between. And while we know that a pufferfish can sting you, there's actually different ways they can deal different damage. See, they deal damage the closer they are, because when they're only semi-puffed up, they'll do 3 HP on hard difficulty, but when they're fully puffed up, they're able to do 4.5 HP, plus an additional 4 HP of damage with the poison over the 6 seconds. 2 snapshots later, the last fish to the party showed up, that being the tropical fish. And the reason there's so many different variants of tropical fish, over 2,000 of them, is actually because of a bug. Black isn't supposed to be one of the different variants that happen, but because of a bug, it now shows up in over 192 different variants, which is a pretty big implementation for a bug. On March 13th of 2018, we got the Drowned, which back in Bedrock Beta editions, used to drop sponge. And while that's since been removed, the drowned chicken jockeys added in a new kind of feature, just not a very intentional one. This being that if a drowned chicken jockey spawns underwater and it floats up to the surface, because it's riding a chicken, given as a chicken that's just hanging out in the middle of the ocean. Water chicken. It's not a bug, it's a feature. And if you think the sounds for the drowned are off-putting, then seeing how they're made is even stranger, considering Minecraft showed off in an official short that it's made from gurgling milk. Which now that I know that, I'm never going to be able to unhear it. When dolphins were first added, they were actually able to wear armor. And while that's since been removed, they do have another way to survive a little longer. See, dolphins normally require equal parts of water and air to survive, but they can stay out of the water if it's raining. Though even if it is, they still prefer to pathfind towards any nearby water. And another mob that could secretly wear armor was the panda, which also got removed in the snapshots. But one thing we never saw from the snapshots was the original look at the pandas. Whereas Mojang shows off in their concept art, the panda had a much more slim model, which is weird to look at, but it's definitely not as strange as the baby panda model, considering that this bug MC161995 caused the baby panda's heads to render blocks away from where the body was, which at this point establishes a weird pattern of Mojang messing up the baby models in their updates. But we still got other mobs to see in this snapshot. Since in 18W43A, pillagers came to the game, and in an unused texture seen in the concept art, originally they would have had these orange pirate vests, and eye patches to boot, which feels a lot more fitting for the update aquatic than this update. And if you ever want to prevent pillagers villager patrols from spawning in your area, then you can do this by just lighting it up. Since even though it happens regardless of skylight, there is a certain amount of light level with the torches where you can keep it safe. Just keep it above an 8 on the light level, and you're fine. But all that light isn't going to prevent a Ravager, which were originally intended to have crossbows on their back, as Mojang shows off in this Meet the Ravager article. And even scarier than that concept is the original art shown off for the Illager Beast mob. Way happier it became the Ravager. And during a part of the game's history, we've been able to make Ravager launchers. Because if you were to stun a Ravager for 2 seconds by blocking your shield, that'll eventually trigger its roar attack and knock back all nearby entities, which combined with the right amount of redstone engineering could launch us over 1100 blocks away. It's weird to say that cats were officially added to Minecraft in only October 31st of 2018, but it was during the Village and Pillage update where they were finally split off from our Ocelot mobs. And if you want to get a cat generator, you don't just need to find a village, or rather cats continue spawning in witch huts as long as there isn't a cat nearby. And if you spawn down cats using a spawn egg, you'll only get black cats at a witch hut. And as of 1.21.4, breeding together 2 cats can give their offspring the compatible color that mixes between the two. So red collar, blue collar, you get purple. Trader llamas are technically a different mob from our regular llamas. And this would have been even more apparent considering that the original concept art for the trader llamas had them with a brown muzzle compared to our regular llamas, which looked like this. And as of recent updates, if you were to enchant the carpet that you see on the trader llama's back using commands, now it finally shows that it's enchanted with the enchantment glint. And as we can see from this Minecraft tweet, the 200th LEGO Brickheads product that was ever made was the trader llama, which of course came along with the wandering trader. And while the ones that we saw in snapshot 19W05A look like what we expect, when they were being designed pre-texture update, they originally just looked like regular villagers. But on Bedrock Edition, they definitely didn't function like one, considering that here they used to be able to spawn underground, making them a lot more like the Rascal mob than like a wandering trader. And if you come across a wandering trader as of 1.21.5, you'll want to keep them around, considering that now they can finally sell enchanted pickaxes, giving us a chance to get both Fortune and Silk Touch pickaxes without an enchantment table. On February 13th of 2019, foxes enter the mix. And in case it isn't obvious, foxes aren't players. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's actually a reference to this bug, where the sounds from foxes would be labeled as player sound effects in the subtitles. And that's also the reason why we got this splash screen. The only new mob added in the April Fool's prank of the 3D shareware version of Minecraft was the Nerd Creeper, which would spawn into the game if you were to use the cheat code NERD with 4 E's. Or if you use the summon command on a creeper but add in the NBT tag D20=1, it spawned the Nerd Creeper as a reference to Dungeons & Dragons. These went through a lot of different phases before they were properly added in, and one of the earliest designs shown off was this one at Minecon, where we see a list detailing the whys of the mob and what it includes. And while Mojang has said that they tried off a whole bunch of different sizes for the bee mob, including making them more sized like actual bees, they decided that half a block in size was the cutest, which after changing our regular bees with the size attribute, I'm inclined to agree. The first mob of the Nether update was the Hoglin, which due to a rendering glitch in development actually gave them pink eyes, as we can see from this tweet from Ulraf. And that wasn't the only weird thing about their development, considering this video where Mojang made it so that Hoglins would dance when they killed off a piglin, even though this was ultimately revealed as a joke. And if you want to play a joke on Hoglins, it's worth noting that they can spawn within the top half of a slab, but they can't actually pathfind out when they're inside. Along with the rework of zombie pigmen into zombified piglins, we also got our regular piglins, which during development, the original plan was that their ears would show off emotion, which one of the Mojang developers showed off in a presentation about prototyping, along with how they tested the limits for how high the baby piglins could stack on top of a baby hoglin. And while we don't see anything this extreme, it is possible for 3 of them to stack up like so. About a month after the piglins, the Nether update brought us the Strider, which even though it's not intentional, if you were to take commands to add a saddle to a baby Strider and then ride it, it does work, but you will take fire damage while going over lava. It's not high enough to keep you off the ground. And like our llamas, as of 1.21.5, the Striders can now show off their saddles enchantments if they wanted to, even if it does nothing. I was surprised to know that Zoglins came so long after our regular Hoglins, but on April 2nd of 2020, the zombie versions came to the snapshots. And in Bedrock, they actually used to spawn during peaceful mode. And that's also part of the reason why Zoglins don't spawn in the Nether. If they did, they would just attack everything around them, which Mojang decided ruined the atmosphere. And as of 1.21.2, Zoglins no longer break their leash upon zombifying, meaning we can leash a Zoglin, just don't get too close. The Piglin Brew is a weird case where we got a mob added in one of the later sub-updates of a major update. And while they normally attack us on sight, it is worth noting that if a goat or a snow golem were to attack a piglin, then any nearby brutes rush to defend them first. And unlike other Nether mobs, the reason these don't retreat from any kind of soulfire, Zoglins, or zombified piglins is because if any of those happen, it would make bashing encounters pretty easy to work around. On December 16th of 2020, we got the Axolotl, which when they were first added, there used to be a bug where axolotls on leashes would move extremely fast. And if you wanted to keep them on land for longer, it is worth noting that an axolotl that you give a water bottle to can reach a maximum of 5 minutes that it can stay on land. In the first first snapshots of 2021, the glow squid came to Minecraft, and on Bedrock Edition, they initially shot out black ink, much like our regular squids, until this was fixed on March 4th of the same year. And the reason why a glow squid stops glowing if you hurt it is that it's supposed to be a way for it to escape and swim away if the player's trying to hunt it. In 21W13A, we got the goat, which was initially passive in its first snapshot, and it wouldn't attack us until the next one. Though it's worth saying that most mobs do not retaliate to a goat's ramming attack, and the ones that retaliate are the piglins, the piglin brutes, hoglins, zoglins, and Johnny Vindicators. Oh, and a screaming goat? Yeah, it also screams when you milk it. I don't like it any more than you do. In the Deep Dark Experimental Snapshot 1, Mojang gave us the Warden, which if we've seen from original concept art, has gone through a lot of different variations. And while nowadays we can see the souls that are going and glowing inside of its chest, it seems like that idea originally came from this blue glowing variant that we see here. And the deadliest version of the Warden used to exist within these early snapshots, considering that when the ranged attack was first added in, it used to deal up to 30 HP, or 15 hearts in a single blow. On March 16th, 2022, the frogs we got looked very different from the ones that Mojang had shown off. And I'm not talking about this concept art for the tree frog, but rather at Minecraft Live 2021, the original cold variant was this muted green, which is itself very different from the original eye shape that Mojang planned on giving the frogs, as seen on the video posted to their official channel, Secret Sounds and Fabulous Frogs. And in the trailer for Minecraft Live 2022, the reason you can see a frog eat a goat is because of this bug on Bedrock Beta, where frogs ate goats the same way that they did magma cubes. And of course, our frogs had to come from the tadpole. And if you were to take a tadpole, feed an entire stack of slime balls before bucketing them up, you can release them in the nether and have them safely grow up into the warm variant of the frog, helping you get the achievement and the better frog lights. And while we can keep them safe this way in the nether, they're not as safe from axolotls, which even though they don't hunt frogs, will hunt our tadpoles. Roughly 2 weeks after the tadpoles, we got ourselves the Allay, which in 1.19.3 were changed with their texture to be translucent, probably to distance themselves from the Vexes, which themselves were changed in that same update. This golem looks like a bug, but it's actually a feature, since in the 22W13 one block at a time snapshot for April Fools, Mojang added in Billy Belong, which was an iron golem change to have its arms constantly in the air, and it'll give the player flowers that are named Maria, Alva, Neo, Hidetaka, and Miyazaki, which is itself a reference to Castle in the Sky, a Miyazaki film that the iron golems were based off of. That's the reason why they give out flowers. And the one block at a time snapshot also gave us Mars, which is that if you were to rename a wolf into Mars, you get this unique texture that was never added anywhere else in the game. There was nothing else special about it, except for the fact that it's really hard to get a name tag and an anvil in this snapshot. October 19th, 2022, we got camels, and thankfully we didn't get this camel, since the early development version showed off this original camel design, which had 2 humps as opposed to the singular hump that we have today. And also in the concept art sheets that Mojang's released, we can see different face designs that they tested out for our camels. In February 2023, we got the sniffer, which as Mojang has shown off in one of their official videos, used to dig up a bed as a placeholder item. And also when they were first added to the game, breeding together 2 sniffers would immediately give you a snifflet, before that was later changed to dropping an egg in snapshot 23W12A. And if you were to use the tag sniffer diggable block, you can actually change what block sniffers will dig up, meaning they could even go and find torchflower seeds from bedrock. This is the moon cow, one of the joke mobs that we only saw in the A or B voting update, which much like the player can wear a glass block on its head to look like an astronaut. Oh, and they also moonwalk. And what's interesting about this is that regular cows can't even have this look if you used commands. The add and replace command doesn't work the same way. But if you want to take them off the moon and return them back to Earth, then by feeding them up air, you can turn them into balloon cows and send them right back over to the Earth. The other special mob from this April Fool's update was Ray Tracing. It's just a guy named Ray who also has a French mode variant, which if you voted on it, you can make everything in the world French. And instead of his normal quips, he'll just say omelette de fromage. There's also a splash bottle of ray tracing, which if you throw it at any mob, disguises it into ray tracing, which all the other mobs go and attack. Strangest about it is that you literally can't even summon ray tracing. The summon command doesn't work. And you also can't tie a lead to ray tracing, considering that when you leash him up, it just makes the lead invisible. Yeah, that one's probably for the best. November 8th of 2023, we got the Breeze, though it looked very different from the original concept art. During a design session, they just throw out a bunch of ideas, and the original idea was basically making a strider with really long legs, which sounds like its own way of horrifying if you were to stumble across it in the trial chambers. And not a big change, but the bottom of the Breeze's breeze rods were changed to be darker within snapshot 24W03A. When the armadillo was added to Minecraft, the animations were purposely made a little bit more simpler, because too many players complain about the sniffer feeling not Minecrafty enough. And the reason why the eyes were Predator originally on the front face of the mob is because Minecraft's art director felt like it was a better way to establish a personal connection. But this was changed later when different players pointed out that front-facing eyes are a thing for predators and side-facing eyes are for prey. And while it's not visible in main game, here's what an armadillo looks like without its shell. And strangest of all is that the official website for the armadillo refers to it as a neutral mob, even though they've always been passive in the code. With the start of 2024, we got the bogged added to Minecraft. And in Bedrock, they had a particularly weird feature. Only here they're able to spawn during the day and only within mangrove swamps. Oh, and also, here's a potato bog texture, which we'd see a lot more of thanks to this next update. On April Fool's of 2024, we got the potato update for Minecraft. In Snapshot 24W14 Potato, we also saw new mobs such as the potato. Functionally the same as a bat, it's just flat and it's also a potato. We also saw the poisonous potato zombie, which could occasionally spawn within the overworld. It's hostile towards other zombies, but weirdly enough doesn't attack villagers. Villagers don't even run from them. Oh, and every sound that it makes, it just says potato. Our first unique potato mobs were the Toxifin slabs. They're basically guardians, except they're half the height, and they're able to stack on top of other Toxifins, kind of like our Striders or Piglins. And if you were to go and punch it in creative mode, you still get the wither effect even if it doesn't affect you. And the biggest of the Toxifin slabs we call the Plague Whale slab, which doesn't do direct damage to you, but rather if it catches you with its laser beam, it applies poison during the duration, and then the wither effect when it fully charges up. And the boss mob of the poisonous potato update was the Mega Spud, which the name comes from Mojang employee Jay Wells' Minecraft username. And if you look at its spawn egg, it has an exclusive rarity type, potato, unlike the epic or other ones that we see before. And even if you switch your difficulty over to peaceful mode, it'll still exist, making it a truly difficult mob to get rid of, much like this one. When the Creaky was first shown off for Minecraft, it originally had paler eyes, but that's not the biggest change that it's seen to its concept. Consider that the original concept art had this in a whole bunch of different tree shapes, even one lined flat like so. And following its tree design, it used to be able to burn, but this was since changed to make it so you could only kill it by breaking down its creaking heart. And that's the same reason why it's only now unharmed by powder snow, berry bushes, and cacti. Before we got the happy ghast, we got the angry ghast, which I know sounds like the actual ghast, but this was a joke mob that was added in the craft mine update. And what makes this one different is that it shoots off 3 different fireballs, and you could get it to spawn after it would unlock by getting the return to sender on a regular ghast in this update. And it's hard to talk about this thing without mentioning just how terrifying it is when it shoots out. And we still got one more terrifying ghast to talk about, but first let's talk about the rest of the craft mine mobs. Since here in this update we also got a whole bunch of different pet mobs, including the armadillo, the axolotl, bee, cat, chicken, cow, creeper, fox, frog, mushroom, polar bear, slime, turtle, and wolf. And there was also a spectator villager mob that would cheer on the player and talk to it about the warden boss fight. Because oh yeah, there's a warden boss fight here too. And now let's talk about that terrifying ghast, which is that by modifying the texture, we can actually see that this is what a baby ghastling looks like without its outer skin. Horrifying. But the whole idea for Happy Ghast actually came from Minecraft Legends, specifically this concept art. And in Java Edition 25W15A Snapshot, if you were to take a Happy Ghast and its harness and turn it back into a ghastling by using the NBT data commands, then you'd see that the harness would still remain visible and even shrink down to fit the ghastling. It's a lot cuter than the other ghastling we were showing off. On July 29th of 2025, the Copper Golem finally came to Minecraft. Though, sprites of the Copper Golem were spread out as Easter eggs within the different mob vote events. So if you played on Bedrock, you could find this in the 2022 and 2023 mob vote events, as well as the Eerie Mojang office party server. And in the first few snapshots where this thing existed, it used to be that when you splash this with an invisibility potion, the eyes would remain visible. And something you're a lot less likely to see is the spinning animation variants that you can find in the game's files. And there, you're able to find different animations that exist for the weathered and oxidized Copper Golem. But in game, they still animate the exact same way as the unoxidized version. On September 2nd of 2025, the mannequin was added to the game, which unlike our armor stands, finally gave us the option to control non-player entities in the game. So even though we've seen Steve mobs show up earlier in this timeline, this is the first that's here to stay. It's also the first that was added with 3 pixel arms, which is how it originally looked when it was first added in, which is even more interesting considering that the official Steve account for Minecraft doesn't actually use the Steve skin. It uses this with a cat onesie. Yeah, even the Herobrine account uses one too. Guess when Minecon's closed to go to the next nearest convention. Prior to the addition of Nautiluses to the game, an old article on Minecraft.net theorized that Nautiluses might have existed once in Minecraft before coming extinct. And as Mojang talks about in their first look for the mob, the reason that the Nautilus gives us the Breath of the Nautilus effect, pausing the player's oxygen meter, is because Nautilus eat pufferfish, and pufferfish are used to brew potions of water breathing. And along with the Nautilus, we got the zombie Nautilus, which prior to Snapshot 25W43A, we used to be able to put them inside of boats, which is a lot less harmful than how they used to be on Bedrock. Considering here, zombie Nautiluses used to be outwardly hostile before they changed it over to the neutral mob that we saw in Java. On October 28th of 2025, the Parched came along with this new jockey that we see in the deserts. And in fact, they used to be able to pick up spears. And only on Bedrock Edition are you able to find Parched spider jockeys. On Java, you only see them riding the camel husk, which despite being a passive mob are never able to spawn in peaceful mode. And like the skeleton horses, we used to be able to ride these underwater, but that was changed in the pre-release. And if you use commands, you're able to summon in a baby camel husk, which is otherwise unused. You can't breed these things, but you can grow it up with a rabbit foot.
And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?